Hello guys, this is Manuel and this is a video tutorial complementary to a video I made on past simple and affirmative sentences. So let's get started. Um, well, if you're already familiar with this, with the concept of auxiliary verbs, this is going to be rather easy for you. But if you're not, well, allow me to explain what auxiliary verbs are. Not all verbs have a meaning, uh, like the way that a verb like play or read or cry have, right? Those verbs mean jugar, leer, llorar. They have a meaning, right? They when we think about those verbs, we think about an action, right? But there are verbs that have no meaning, and those verbs, their function in the sentence is different. They don't uh, they don't carry out a meaning. What they do is that they tell you in which tense the sentence is. And in the case of past tense, there is an auxiliary verb, and that is the verb did. And what did does, and it tells you this sentence is in past, right? And that's it. Let's have a look at the first sentence that we have on the slide. It says, did you play soccer when you were a kid? If we were to put a meaning to each word in the sentence, the words you play soccer when you were a kid, they all have meanings. Usted jugaba o jugar fútbol cuando usted era un niño, etc. Right? But the word did doesn't really have a meaning, right? The word did, what it does is that it tells you, right? This sentence is in past, right? Same happens with the next question. If you ask a question like, did Marta bring the money? The words Marta bring the money, they all have meanings. And that's Marta traer el dinero. But it's not Marta traerá el dinero. It's not Marta trae el dinero. It's Marta trajo. So how do you know it's trajo? How do you know it's past tense? Well, because of did. Because of the word did. That's an auxiliary verb. An auxiliary verb tells you in which tense a sentence is. That's basically it. Same thing happens in negative statements. Negative statements also need auxiliary verbs in past tense in English. Notice the answer to the first question. If I ask, did you play soccer when you were a kid? I can answer something like, no, I did not play soccer. Well, the first no is just extra. I could just answer, I did not play soccer. But the point is that the word did, it's absolutely necessary to understand that I'm talking about something I did, or in this case, I did not, something that happened in the past, right? It's an auxiliary verb and it's totally necessary. Also notice that the verbs in questions and in negative statements, they are not in past form, all right? That will be kind of redundant because the auxiliary verb is already telling you that the sentence is in past. So the question is not, did you play? Is not there is no ed right there, right? The question is, did you play? And the verb is absolutely normal. The second sentence, which has an irregular verb, is even clearer. Did Marta bring? The past tense of bring is brought, and it's not did Marta brought. The sentence, the question is, did Marta bring? The verb has to be in present. There is no need to write it or to say it in past form, right? That's very important when we ask questions or when we answer with a negative sentence. Well, class, let's practice a little bit. So here we have a bunch of sentences in past in English, and let's try to make them negative. We have an example, right? Sentence number one. We stayed in a hotel. How would you turn that sentence past? Well, simple. You add the auxiliary, and the verb is now in present form. And in order to make it negative, we add the word not. Notice that we can say did not, or we can say didn't. It doesn't really matter which one you want to use. It's a contractions, and contractions are very common in English, and they have the same meaning. You could say, we did not stay in a hotel, or we didn't stay in a hotel, the meaning would be the same. So let's pause the video and let's try to make these sentences negative. Well, class, hopefully your answers look something like this. Notice that I mixed contractions and non-contracted forms because, again, I want to insist on this point, right? They all mean the same. It doesn't really matter which one you want to use. Something important here that sometimes causes confusion to Spanish speakers is the case that we have on sentence 4. Let's have a look at that sentence. It says, Toshi did his homework, right? Now, I have been insisting so far about how the word did does not have a meaning. Well, it doesn't, but that's when it's an auxiliary. But the word did can also be the past form of the verb do, and in that case, it does have a meaning, right? So that's something we gotta be careful, extra careful about, because in Spanish, especially beginning students, they get confused sometimes, and they ask me all the time, why is it that we have two forms of the verb did in a sentence like Toshi did not do his homework? Well, one is because it's the verb do, right? And it's in present because the auxiliary did, which is the other one, is telling me that the sentence is in past tense, right? So that's it, class. Let's continue. And now we're going to practice some questions. So this is the final exercise regarding regular verbs. We have a bunch of words. We need to rearrange them in order to ask coherent questions, like we just did in the first one, right? We have the words to the beach, Stephanie, did, and go. How would you arrange those words to make a question? Well, you have it right there. Did Stephanie go to the beach? Very important. The word did, the auxiliary verb, comes before the person, comes before Stephanie. Sometimes it's a noun, sometimes it's a pronoun, but it's still, there's always somebody performing the action. In this case, going to the beach. Now, how would you rearrange the other 6 sentences to make questions? Let's pause the video and let's see how you do. Well, class, hopefully you got it right, and your answers look like this. Did Bob go swimming? Did Carl and Matthew have a good time? And etc. etc. Notice that the word did always comes before the first. Well, it's time to talk about verb to be. Remember, verb to be is always special, it's always different, and past tense, as we said in the previous video, is not an exception. Verb to be has 2 different forms in past, was and were. Now, if we want to make a sentence negative with was or with were, there is no need for an auxiliary, and that's also another difference, right? With all the other verbs, we will never see the word did in a sentence that contains a was or were when we're talking about a past action. So it's just a matter of adding not, and that's it. And you can have it in contracted form or in non-contracted form. So it can be I was not or I wasn't, and it means the same. So that ends up being something. It results in something like this. If you want to say yo no estaba en la fiesta, you would say I was not at the party or I wasn't at the party. If you want to say yo no era feliz, you would say I wasn't happy or I was not happy, and so on and so forth. Same thing happens with questions. We have the same forms, was and where, and what we need to remember is that we need to switch the order in the sentence. So if you want to ask a question like ¿tú eres feliz? Well, you wouldn't ask it like you were happy, but instead you want to switch the position of where with you, and the sentence should be something like were you happy? And that's it. Well, to finish this video, let's practice a little bit. So here we have a bunch of sentences in past with verb to be. What we need to do is make them negative. So let's pause the video and see how you make these sentences negative. Well, class, Again, I insist that you can use contractions if you want to, or you can just omit them altogether, and you can have sentences like this. They weren't from Japan, there was not a supermarket, their car wasn't expensive, etc. Right? So hopefully your answers look um, like this. And finally, we're going to practice with questions. So again, we have a bunch of words. We need to rearrange them in the proper order to ask a coherent question. So first sentence is an example. We have the words job, was, what, and his. How do you come up with a question from using those words? Well, something like, what was his job? So how would you do the same thing with the other four? Let's pause the video and find out. Well, class, these are the solutions. And again, I hope that you got them all right. Class, it's very important that you practice this concept by doing a lot of exercises. Sometimes it's good to understand how it works in theory, and it helps. But if you don't practice, believe me, eventually you will forget. So the only way that you can really learn this is by doing exercises. It's a matter of Googling past tense exercises or past tense to be exercises, and you will find plenty of websites that contain lots and lots of exercises to practice this. Well, class, there is one more video about past tense, and that will cover the pronunciation of regular past tense endings, which can be a little bit tricky. So I will see you there, and that's it.